Gran, and many others as they traverse the skies on their adventurous journey to a legendary island. He lives on a remote island where farming is in full bloom. He also works quite hard and is especially proficient at woodcutting. While he cuts them up one by one, his friend named Aaron just sits there and talks about how Gran just keeps moving forward whenever he's working on a task. As this small talk was going on, a cute yet fantastical creature named Vyrn returns with Aaron's father. Vyrn looks so much like a Pokemon that I wouldn't be surprised if one of the Pokemon card game manufacturers accidentally also included him in the roster. He's Gran's companion, and as I said before, he's quite cute. Don't call him a lizard though. Okay, so Vyrn and Gran are about to enjoy some delicious apples given to them by Aaron's dad for helping him out with the work. But that's when they witness a gigantic battleship in the sky. As they're wondering why a battleship is flying over their island of all places, the ship suddenly explodes from one side and out falls a glistening object, or perhaps an individual. It falls into the forest. Both Gran and Vyrn instantly rush to the forest. Gran wanted to see for himself what fell there. They search throughout the forest, come across a few broken fragments of the battleship, and finally encounter a young, pale beauty lying next to the tree. The glistening light they had seen falling into the forest was actually emitting from her chest, so they wake her up. The girl suddenly gets all nervous and scared, but Gran and Vyrn's friendly expressions let her ease up, and then she properly introduces herself. Her name is Lyria. She was confined in a dark room for a painfully long period of time. That is, until an individual named Katalina helped her escape. However, since then, both her and Katalina are being chased by the authorities from the Empire. And surely enough, before their conversation could end, a couple of fully armored soldiers show up in order to get Lyria. Gran uses his swords to wreck them, but one of them manages to shoot a flare into the sky to give the other soldiers the signal. An armored female knight also catches the signal and rushes toward the location. Now Gran, Lyria, and Vyrn were running with all their might as the soldiers continued to surround them. Fortunately, that woman from before catches up and then single-handedly destroys all of the soldiers. Her name is Katalina, and she's the one who explains the situation with Lyria. As it turns out, Lyria was being used as an experiment for a long period of time, but one day the extent of her powers turned out to be too dangerous, so she was confined. From there on out, she was living a life of complete loneliness, until of course Katalina broke her out of that solitary confinement. Now Katalina and Lyria were going to be on their way since more and more soldiers would continue to chase them, but Gran states that he'll help them out as well. Together they try to escape from the grasp of the Imperial Army and even save a father and his daughter from the soldiers. However, before long they're confronted by a military captain named Pommern and his troops. He summons a four-headed violent dragon named Hydra. Even Gran, the protagonist himself, couldn't handle the menacing CGI. Gran tries to run away, but the Hydra surrounds him with flames, and then stomps the life out of him using his claws. That's right, Gran quite literally dies. Vyrn desperately calls out his name, but there's no answer. How could there be? Gran was already dead. Vyrn starts crying, Katalina's shocked, and as for Lyria, she lets out tears as she declares that Gran was protecting her. And so, now it's her turn. She uses the power of the glistening crystal on her chest and consciously grants it to Gran. Just like that, life is seen returning to Gran's eyes. Lyria's power was being transferred to him. That despicable military captain intervenes by using another crystal to restrict Lyria. But things are alright. Gran has already returned back to life. The man himself gradually gets up, realizes that something's different about him, and then, alongside Lyria, he starts giving off the same aura as that crystal. Together they summon a legendary black dragon called Bahamut, and everyone is taken aback by Bahamut's glorious CGI. The captain is shocked out of his living daylights. He couldn't comprehend the presence of Bahamut and simply said, "What is that thing?" Though in the heat of that moment, he orders his dragon Hydra to use flamethrower, but it wasn't very effective. Bahamut then uses a hyper beam and destroys most of the Imperial Army, including Hydra. It was super effective. The captain is scared enough to pee his pants, and so he chooses to flee. The battle was over. KO. Perfect. Lyria withdraws Bahamut's soul in her crystal, but suddenly Gran collapses. While he's unconscious, he recalls memories from his past. How his father used to talk about all these other islands, the island of fire, the island of wind, the island of the primal beasts, and much more. Looks like his father is also waiting for him at a certain island. And so that's why Gran always had the goal of one day journeying through the sky. His friend Aaron tells him that it's all nonsense, there's no other islands, but Gran thinks otherwise. An interesting fact about the world building of this fantasy epic is that the islands are literally floating in the sky. When Gran wakes up, he's greeted by Lyria, who casually proceeds to hug and then touch him all over his chest. The man gets embarrassed since he had no shirt on at the moment. Shortly after, Katalina and Vyrn also enter the room. He's then told about what exactly happened back there, and how thankfully none of the villagers were hurt. Katalina also gives some context about Lyria's Lyria's power, how she's able to control primal beasts such as the Bahamut and many more. Ordinarily, resurrecting a person back to life is downright impossible, but because of the unusual nature of Lyria's power, he was brought back to life. Even the power of commanding primal beasts is only reserved for individuals revered as astrals. However, for some odd reason, she has it. Her existence is shrouded in mystery, and even she herself has no idea who she is. Though as for Gran's resurrection, since Lyria shared her power, the two of them now have the same life force, which is why they can't stay apart from each other. This meant that Gran would have to accompany them on their travels. Their ultimate destination is the Island of Astrals, or to be more precise, the Island of Primal Beasts. Little did they know the young man was yearning for a chance like this. The next morning, he and Vyrn leave together with Lyria and Katalina on an old aircraft after bidding the villagers farewell. Though has there ever been an adventure without trouble? Katalina excelled at a lot of things, but she certainly wasn't a good pilot. Their aircraft goes out of control and they forcibly land on a nearby island. A man named Rackman witnesses the utterly sad and disastrous condition their aircraft was in and can't help but condemn the passengers for not taking care of their aircraft. He also tells Katalina to at least get some licensed pilot training. Now the gang had no choice but to explore the island. They venture into the city to explore and do some shopping, while Katalina goes to check if there's an aircraft or airship they can get from the airship station. Unfortunately, all of them are busy at the moment. They'll have to wait a few days at the earliest. Gran and the others come across Rackman once again. He properly introduces himself this time and also shows them that he's currently working on repairing their aircraft. Though that's when two quirky, yet also shady individuals pop up with apples. As it turns out, they were with the Imperial Army. First, Gran and the others run. When they're cornered, Gran uses his new sword attack and then escapes. And quite conveniently, he also gets some help from a mysterious lady who just used magic from a considerable distance. Rackman also helped them out. Later, they discuss their current situation and realize that they would need a helmsman. Since they were in a cafeteria, two other customers happened to listen in on their conversation and instantly recommended someone named Rackman. Now, since the gang was already familiar with the guy, they're on their way to invite him. Though before they could find Rackman, they got into some trouble with the Imperial Army. Luckily, Rackman first casually uses his rifle to create a distraction, helps them escape through a hidden tunnel, and then takes them to his place. Once there, they request him to be their helmsman, but Rackman ends up refusing. As it turns out, Rackman has resolved to not go anywhere without his dear ship named Grand Cypher. It's a ship that he has dedicated his entire life to building. However, since it became unable to fly, Rackman also moved on from flying, since he doesn't want to fly away without his beloved Grand Cypher. Gran and the others understand his reason and don't try to push him. However, there was another pressing matter that they had to deal with. The Imperial Army's general, whom they had run away from just before, is actually planning on destroying the island. They have to not only inform the common folk, but also have to make an effort to evade the attack. The enemy general is using a dragon that is revered as the goddess of the wind. It's creating insane hurricanes throughout the island, and the general has also destroyed the last airship available to them. Lyria then states that they might be able to subdue that dragon, but they'll have to be close enough first. This is where Rackman becomes the man. He resolves himself to save the island, and so his ship awakens as well. The man navigates through the violent wind waves until they finally reach the goddess of the wind, the dragon named Tiamat. Tiamat has been corrupted, which is why even when Lyria tries to sincerely communicate with her, it's of no use. And so it all came down to Gran. Lyria envelops Gran in the power of the legendary dragon Bahamut and tells him to go destroy Tiamat's crystal, as that's the only way to stop the havoc. Gran is successful, and once the corruption around Tiamat wears off, the goddess of the wind begins to disappear. Though before she vanishes, she presents Lyria with a crystal as a gift. The day is saved. Later, Gran meets Rackman and once again asks him to be their helmsman. Well, to be fair, Rackman had no reason to refuse since his ship was already up and running. Though the man asks Gran about their destination. Where does he want to go? Gran simply states the land of the Astrals. Obviously, Rackman is shocked since that island is the island of the primal beasts. He asks Gran why he wants to go there, to which Gran replies that his dad is waiting there for him. Hearing this, Rackman tells Gran that he always thought the island of Astrals didn't actually exist, but since it's there, he also wants to check it out for himself. And so he shakes Gran's hand and states that he'll be their helmsman. Just like that, the gang sets out to the next island on their path. This island is well known for its ever-flowing river of magma and the prosperous steel industry. They set out to do some shopping, but barely anyone is seen outside their homes. For some unknown reason, there was a quarantine. Though a restaurant was still bustling with people, they enter there for a nice dinner, but are quickly introduced to a sturdy man who claims to be a secret agent for the island's government. He knows Gran and the others saved the island of Port Breeze, and decides to seek out their help in finding their island's Archduke. He's a benevolent leader. The people will be upset and may even go into a frenzy if they were to realize that the Archduke is missing. They decide to help the government and soon begin the search, though it doesn't take long before Katalina realizes that they're being followed. After scouting through the city, they enter an abandoned warehouse. The person who had been following them is attacked by goblins, and so her presence is revealed. Gran and the others help her out. Her name is Eucles, and she's the Archduke's disciple. The reason she had been following them is because she's also trying to find the man in question. Together, they discuss their strategy and decide to explore a certain intriguing place. They travel to the other side of the island and encounter a giant cave whose entrance is hidden with the use of magic. They enter the cave and end up finding a large-scale laboratory. This is where the gang encounters two familiar faces. It is that shady duo who tried to attack them back at Rockham's workshop. Though this time, the Supreme Advisor of the Empire is also with them. It's the strongest Imperial Knight in the kingdom, aka the Black Knight. Looks like the Imperial Army is also searching for the Archduke for their own reasons. When they leave, the gang ends up encountering mechanical monsters who are shrouded in the Archduke's magic. The gang makes their escape by going further into their territory. Little did they know the Archduke was exactly where they were escaping to. That's right, they soon enter a gigantic hall where there stands a giant mech along with the Archduke himself. His disciple, Eucles, tells them that the Archduke is acting strange for some reason. There's bloodlust in his eyes and he seeks Lyria's powers. As this is going on, the Black Knight and the others from the Imperial Army are observing the sight from a safe distance. In fact, they're the ones who awaken that giant mech so that the corrupted Archduke can then command it to attack Lyria and the others. They try everything but fail to match up to it. Even Gran, with the power of the Bahamut, couldn't ultimately defeat this mech. That's when the Archduke's disciple uses one of the magic spells that she was taught by her master to trip this giant mech. From there on out, they all decide to use their powers in coherence with each other. Everyone uses their spells simultaneously and defeats this menacing mechanical monster through the power of teamwork. Eucles then returns her master back to his senses using a magic spell. The moment the Archduke finally remembers her, both of them just break into tears. The Archduke found her after she had lost her family, and ever since then, he's been treating her like his own daughter. Anyways, now that they found the person in question, it was about time that the gang ventured out once again. Eucles asked them about their endeavors, to which they tell her about their ultimate destination of reaching the island of Astral. The next morning, they're bidding farewell to the Duke before embarking on their journey, though quite unexpectedly, Eucles declares that she'll be traveling with them. She always wanted to experience the outside world, and just like that, the gang gets another promising crewmate. Sometime later, as they're all exploring some ancient ruins on a small island, the ground breaks and they end up falling into a pit. The fall divides them into two groups, who each try to survive using their respective skills. As for Gran, Eucles, and Rockham, they end up encountering two young girls who appear to be treasure hunting. Though since they were in some major trouble because of a sand goblin, Gran and the others protect them from this creature, though they were falling short of defeating it using ordinary means. That's when Gran comes up with a plan. He jumps and dunks a firebomb into the creature's mouth. It implodes and then a door opens which leads them to a downright insane amount of gold. It's the treasure of these ancient ruins. Among that treasure there's a peculiar sword, and surprisingly enough, the moment Gran holds that sword, every one of them is instantly teleported to the surface. Furthermore, everything about the ruins disappears. Even the treasure. The treasure hunter girls do get a little sad though. No treasure despite all that hassle they went through. Anyways, the gang sets out to the next island on their journey. It's an island with extraordinarily beautiful water and equally beautiful architecture. It looks uninhabited from the outside, but there's an entire prosperous kingdom hidden inside. Since they're at war with the Empire, the security is tight. So if it weren't for an onlooker who recognized Rockham, the gang would have taken a lot longer to find the hustling city inside. Anyway, now that they were inside, they decided to do some shopping. Gran gets Lyria a beautiful necklace, which she's happy to receive, but shortly after she's kidnapped by some odd-looking hooded figures. Gran instantly rushes to her rescue, but is unable to catch them. The one behind her abduction is none other than the Imperial Army. They are restricting Lyria's power using a certain gem, and the army has also started to invade the city. The one calling the shots seems to be that ugly military captain named Pommern from the very beginning. Lyria witnesses the invasion and can't help but feel responsible for the people who are getting injured one after another. To make matters worse, the captain calls her a tool of destruction. He also breaks the necklace which Gran gave her as a present. The captain's behavior honestly reminds me of Sondom from One Piece. Gran shows up and tries to fight the Imperial army, all the while rushing over to Lyria. Meanwhile, the protective deity of the island named Leviathan emerges. It's a water-type primal beast who starts causing indiscriminate havoc. The entire city was about to be flooded due to tsunami waves, but thankfully, a mysterious woman uses her magic to get them away from the danger zone. She's the same woman who helped them escape once before, though because of what happened, Lyria is now unconscious. That mysterious woman named Rosetta takes them to a giant tree located in Lumacy Isles. Full of giant, glorious trees, it's an island dubbed as the island that the world forgot about. Though because of all the trees, there's also no sense of direction. Luckily, with Rosette as their guide, they arrive at the giant tree. When she comes into contact with the tree, the primal beast named Yggdrasil that rules over the forest emerges. It lets Gran enter Lyria's unconsciousness and helps her wake up. Though when she's awake, the dragon of the seas Leviathan also emerges yet again. They return to that island right away and are shocked to see it in such a decimated state. Unfortunately, the inhabitants are about to leave their place of home because of the destruction. Lyria advises them against it because if they leave, their guardian deity will also die. His life force is tied to them. And so, as everyone tries to protect the city from suffering more destruction, if you played the Granblue Fantasy Versus game, you'd be surprised to see how many characters from that game show up during this ordeal. Anyways, Lyria resolves to help the Leviathan snap out of it. Gran takes on her resolve, imbues his sword with the strength of the primal beasts, and then dashes straight toward Leviathan. He slashes and destroys the crystal on his neck and relieves the protective deity of the corruption. Before Leviathan disappears, it also presents Lyria with a gift just like Tiamat. When everything settles down, there's a big banquet as everyone celebrates. Next morning, they leave for the island. There's a lot of commotion since everyone's trying to bid them farewell. Though as for the old man who recognized Rackham back then and guided them into the city in the first place, he was a major supporting character during this ordeal, and from then on out, he'll be accompanying our gang on their travels. Now they'll be heading to their next stop. Whatever may lie at the end of this vast sky, they'll reach it together. Honestly, the world building in this anime is beautiful. And if you're into fighting games, ArcSys did this anime a wonderful justice with Granblue Fantasy Versus. Visually astounding, just like Dragon Ball FighterZ, and just a testament to how far anime fighting games have come. Anyway, and that's the end of the video. Subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this. See you at the next one.